Let's talk about how you see your new job. Here's what you had to say on Friday.
I think there's been, at times, a disconnect between the way we see the president and how much we love the president and the way some of you perhaps see the president.
So how do you close what you call that disconnect?
Well, listen, I actually don't think that's the hard part. I think the hard part is just to get reorganized and figure out. One of the first things I want to do is just message to people, we got to get the leaks stopped, Chris. I know that it's Washington, so it's going to be impossible to stop all of them. But I think what's going on right now is a high level of unprofessionalism, and it's not serving the president. So my three simple things is I would like to reset the culture inside the comms department so that people recognize that I'm actually there to serve them, and they're going to be working with me, not for me. That's a very big distinction. And that all of us are there to serve the president of the United States and his agenda. And so first thing for me is I want to hit a cultural reset button. Second thing is we got to get the leaks stopped. If we don't get the leaks stopped, I am a business person, and so I will take dramatic action to stop those leaks. And then the third thing is I'll be traveling with the president this week, and we're going to focus and refine the messaging from the White House. He's one of the most effective communicators that's ever been born, and we're going to make sure that we get that message out directly to the American people. And I think that arbitrage spread, the gap between how certain people think of him and how I see him, or say like someone like Ivanka sees him, that will start to narrow, sir.
I want to pick up on the leaks. You say you're willing to take drastic action to stop them. Now, these are leaks both coming from inside the White House and also from what's called the deep state, people in the bureaucracy, particularly the intelligence agencies or law enforcement. What kind of drastic action?
Listen, I'm going to be very, very clear with people. As far as I'm concerned, that staff has amnesty. We'll see how they do with me at the helm. If the leaks don't stop, I'm going to pare down the staff because it's just not right, Chris. I think it's not fair to the president. It's actually not fair to America or the people in the government. I'm not going to be able to stop the leaks or in the intergovernmental agencies and all that other stuff. That's a whole different ball of wax. But something's going on inside the White House that the president does not like, and we're going to fix it.
Well, you say pare down the staff. I mean, this isn't coming just from the communications team. Are you saying that you've been given carte blanche? You've been given authority by the president?
I'm just focused on the communications team. As far as I'm concerned, it's a new start for everybody in that team, and everybody in that team can stay as long as they follow the protocol of not leaking, because at the end of the day, the president's super upset about the leaks. It's unprofessional. And so you're asking me what the first steps are. That's going to be one of my first steps, sir.
Do you believe that the mainstream media deliberately puts out fake news about this president?
There is some fake news, unfortunately. When you say the mainstream media, I think that's a very broad statement. And so what I'd like to say, and I'd like to believe, that there's still a level of objectivity in the mainstream media. But unfortunately, there are specific individuals that do stretch stories or do fabricate things. I've been the victim of it myself, and so it's definitely there, Chris. I don't think we can dial that down, but we can use the mechanisms of social media and the president's presence in social media to hop over that if necessary. But what I would say to you is that the good news here is that it's a fresh start for everybody. I certainly want to engage the mainstream media. I expect that they're going to want to hold me and the White House accountable, but we're going to sort of want to hold them accountable, too. So I'm hoping that there'll be symmetry in that relationship.
You say that there are certain individuals, certain outlets. You want to call any of them out by name?
No. Again, I think it's more specific to specific stories, for that matter, and so it's not necessary to call anybody out by name. I'm hoping to create an era of a new good feeling with the media, give everybody a fresh start. Let's see if we can reset this and create a more positive mojo among everybody. And again, like I said, we have a story that we want to tell. It's a phenomenal story for the American people. There's a policy agenda in place that I think is phenomenal for the American people. If you look at the last 6 months, I think there's been some distortion in terms of how successful we've actually been. and I think we want to clear that up. And I think the president made that clear in his press release on Friday that we're doing very, very well. Lots of the American people are super happy, and we just need to close that gap, if you will, and make that connection more forcefully.
Well, one of the areas where the president has said there's been a lot of fake news has been in the Russia investigation and the potential for a scandal there. President Trump reportedly wanted you because you're a tough street fighter like he is. Is he putting together a war staff in the White House to take on the various Russia investigations?
Well, listen, I sort of see it as a two-pronged as it relates to that. I mean, we want to refine our rapid response team. In some ways, we want to de-escalate things and have there be a level of diplomacy. In other ways, we want it to be very hard-hitting and warlike. And so it's sort of a blend of those two things, Chris. But as it relates specifically to Russia, you know, there's certain things that I can talk about from inside the White House, and there's certain things that I'm not allowed to talk about. And I really haven't been briefed yet by White House counsel Don McGahn as to what I can and cannot talk about.
Well, let me ask you.
Here's what I'll say to you, if you don't mind me saying this. I worked intensely on that campaign. And I think that the Russian situation is completely overblown. I was falsely accused of things related to Russia. I know other people are being falsely accused of things related to Russia. And I'm confident that tomorrow when Jared Kushner speaks, and I'll keep my fingers crossed in saying this to you, it'll probably be the last time that he has to talk about Russia. And so for me, I'd like to get this behind us. I'll tell you one of the things I do not like about Washington. I sort of feel like it's scandals incorporated down in Washington, that we have to make up things about each other, Chris, so that we can personally destroy each other to make us less effective as public servants. I don't like it at all. I'm going to try to lead.
Let me interrupt for a minute. Yeah. You'll learn we do this here in Washington. On the specific question, because you say that you know, part of it is diplomacy, part of it is hard hitting. Do you see anything wrong with going after the special counsel and his team when it comes to possible conflicts of interest, or when it comes to your feeling or the president's feeling that he is expanding the scope of his investigation too far into the president's business affairs?
I want the president to be the president, and I want him to express the full nature of his personality. Corey Lewandowski used to say early on in the campaign, let Trump be Trump. It's a little disrespectful now because he's the president, so let's let the president be the president. And my point is, if he wants to talk about things like that, I'm not going to want to stop him or even be able to stop him. I want to be there to help aid and abet his agenda. And so for me, I have a different personality style from the president in some ways. In other ways, we're very similar. I just want there to be fairness and objectivity. And so let's see how the whole thing rolls out. But my feeling about this thing is that it's overblown. It's completely unfair. It's designed to take people off message and off of our agenda. And we're going to get people on our message and on our agenda.
Let me ask you one last Russia question, then I want to talk about agenda. In a tweet this week, the president said this weekend. He asserted his complete power to pardon. Question, if he and his people have done nothing wrong, why even talk about pardons?
You see, this is one of those things about Washington, and it's the convolution and the nature of things. I'm in the Oval Office with the president last week. We're talking about that. He says he brought that up. He says, but he doesn't have to be pardoned. There's nobody around him that has to be pardoned. He was just making the statement about the power of pardon. And so now all of the speculation and all the spin is always going to pardon himself and do all this other nonsense. The president does not need to pardon himself. And the reason he doesn't need to pardon himself is that he hasn't done anything wrong.
Okay.
And so for me, we can microanalyze every one of the president's tweets. That's fine. We can go in that direction. But what I want to do for people is get it back on the president's agenda. This is a jobs president. This is a president that's going to help middle-class families, lower middle-class families. You want to talk about gaps, Chris? There is a wide income gap that many elites do not feel, but the president feels it, and members of his staff feel it, and people in the middle of America feel it. And you know what we're going to do? We're going to put policies together that close that gap. If people want to talk about these nonsensical scandals, I'll let them do that, but I'm going to be missile-locked on focusing on the president's agenda and helping people to understand the president the way I know him and the way I love him.
I got to ask you one last question, and I hesitate to do that, but Does the president still have full confidence in his attorney general? He has had some tough things to say about Jeff Sessions this weekend and his decision to recuse. And then there's this new story in the Washington Post that the Russian ambassador supposedly told his superiors that he had talked with Sessions about campaign matters with Sessions tonight. Does the president still have confidence in Sessions?
See, this is something I think is super important. A question like that, I want to leave that for the president and Attorney General Sessions to talk about themselves. My guess is that he's in the seat, and so therefore the president still has confidence in him. I'm sure, like all of us, there's things that Attorney General Sessions has done that the president doesn't like, and let them have that conversation amongst themselves, and hopefully we can fix it. But Chris, here's the thing. The good news about President Trump is that he wears a lot on his sleeve. We know exactly where he comes from and where he stands on things. The reason why the American people love him and the reason why he became president is because he's a, wears heart on his sleeve type of person, very caring. But also as a good business executive, he sort of tells people how he feels.
All right.
But again, another thing I don't like about Washington, if I don't like something that you're saying and I put out a tweet and say I don't like Chris Wallace, all of a sudden now you and I have to be mortal enemies for the rest of our lives. I don't think that's how it works in American business, and so we sort of need to stop doing that in the political system.
Okay. Speaking of tweets, in the time we have left, let's do a lightning round. Quick questions, quick answers, Anthony.
Yeah.
You have been deleting some old tweets over the last couple of days, you say, and quite understandably, because they were a distraction. They were when you weren't working for Donald Trump. Now you are working for Donald Trump. But as you know, all this stuff lives forever, and I want to put one of them up.
Fine.
In 2012, you tweeted, "We, the USA, has 5% of the world's population, but 50% of the world's guns. Enough is enough. It is just common sense to apply more controls." Question, do you still believe that?
Well, okay, so the answer to the question is I'm a pro-Second Amendment person. My dad was a hunter. I've got no problem with that. What I was worried about in 2012 in urban centers, if you don't have a little level of gun control, it could lead to more violence. But the truth be told, and this is the reason why I deleted the tweets, Chris, it's a total distraction. It's total nonsense. When I made the decision to take this job, my politics and my political ideas do not matter at all. What matters is that I am subordinating all of that to the president's agenda. Ed Koch, who lived in this great city, had a great line. If you believe in 9 out of the 12 things that I'm for, you should vote for me. If you believe 12 out of the 12 things, you need a psychiatrist. Okay, and so
all right.
as far as I'm
wait,
concerned,
now let me pick up because you're blowing the whole idea of the lightning round, and I want to move on.
But that's a super loaded question for a 15-second answer.
Okay.
All right, but keep going, Chris. Go ahead.
Here's another one. You talked on Friday about that famous incident in 2015. I know you're going to shake your head, where you called President Trump a hack politician, but I looked at the tape. It's actually much worse than that, Anthony, so take a look.
He's a hack politician. He's probably going to make Elizabeth Warren his vice presidential nominee with comments like that. The politicians don't want to go at Trump because he's got a big mouth and he's afraid he's going to light him up on Fox News and all these other places. But I'm not a politician. Bring it.
Right, so why is he resonating?
You're an inherited money dude from Queens County. Bring it, Donald.
Bring it, Donald. So here's the question.
Hey, look, we're both New Yorkers. By the way,
but here's the question. Is that what Trump likes about you, Mr. Trump, President Trump likes about you, that you're like him, you fight like him?
Hey, let me tell you something. He hit first, and he called me from Air Force One yesterday on the way down to christening the aircraft carrier. He says, "You don't even remember the whole story." And I said, "What do you mean, sir?" He says, "Well, I brought you into my office. I said, I'm thinking about running for president. You told me that I wasn't running, which is true. This is way, way early. And I told him I was going to sign up with Scott Walker because I needed a candidate."
All right, we're on a lightning round. Get to the point.
Okay, but if we're on a lightning round and you're showing a clip like that, you got to give me a chance to explain myself, okay? The president was hitting the hedge fund industry that morning on Fox and Friends, okay? And so I'm a fighter. When he's hitting the hedge fund industry, and that's my lifeblood, I'm hitting back. Okay, he knows that. He respects it about me. We were laughing about that last night. But what I love about you guys okay, is it's a 3-minute segment that I guess is going to be played for eternity. We should put it on the Voyager spacecraft and send it interstellar, okay? I love the guy.
Let me just
We're
say,
New Yorkers, and this is my point. I want to finish my point. I love the guy. I have spent the last 18 months supporting him unyieldingly because he's a great person, and he's going to be he is a phenomenal president. He's even going to be a better president. But you're not allowed to fight a little bit amongst your friends. If you're not allowed to do that, what are we doing?
Am I not allowed to actually put that on? I mean, it's funny. It's
no,
interesting. I make you a promise. I make you a promise. I will never play that clip again.
Play it. You can play it again next week.
No, I don't want to play it again.
I'm totally fine with it. But here's my point. I'm a New Yorker. He's a New Yorker. We're allowed to go at it a little bit.
I'm a New Yorker, too, so that makes 3 of us.
Yeah, so God bless. But my point is, we were laughing about it yesterday. I think John Carl asked me about it at the press conference. He says, does the president remind you? Every 15 seconds he reminds me, okay? I apologize for it. We're moving on.
One quick final question. You got 30 seconds to answer this one. You have suggested, this is before you became communications director, maybe we'll put on a show, a White House show, every morning, anchor desk on the North Lawn to talk about the administration policies. Are you serious?
I don't know. I got to talk to the president about it. I mean, that was when I was brainstorming before I had an official job. But here's what I would say to you in less than 30 seconds. We are going to reinvent the way we deliver information out of the White House because the world has changed. I have in my pocket a radio studio, a television studio, and a movie studio. The entire world has changed, and we need to rethink the way we're delivering our information. And so stay tuned.
Anthony, thank you.
President Trump's 2016 victory was brought about in no small part by the support he received from America's working class. Now, our next guest says that's no surprise, that elites have long failed to understand and appreciate the massive group that makes up the white working class, a group who have proven to be, in her words, a potent political force. Joining me now, UC Hastings professor and author of White Working Class, Overcoming Class Cluelessness in America, Joan Williams. So, Joan, it's great to see you. Appreciate you joining us tonight.
Well,
I'd love you to just define for us what you mean by class cluelessness.
Well, first of all, who's this white working class? They're really the middle 53%. They're really the middle class. And Americans in the past 40 years have gotten to know a lot about the poor and a lot about other groups. But the working class really has fallen from view in a very significant way, and people don't know much about them. And exactly at that time, the middle America was falling behind economically in ways that have made them truly infuriated. So that was an annoying situation, and I think that's what we heard in Trump's election.
So who's been clueless about this? Who are you talking about? Who's failed to spot this?
I think that, you know, it's funny, I've been on book tour in both the United States and the UK, and I think the UK understands how to talk about class a lot better than the US. I think in the US, elites very broadly have been pretty clueless that there are society, for example, I'll give you an example. The American elite earning, say, $200,000 often refers to themselves as upper middle class. And one of the messages is, you know, by the way, if you're earning $200,000, you are not middle class. You are about the top 6%. The true middle class in the United States has a median income of about $75,000 a year.
So why do you think that the experience and the kind of policy needs of the group you're talking about was off the agenda for so long? What actually explains that? I mean, the data is there, the stories are there, people can see it if they spend time in those communities. Why were people so clueless?
Yeah, well, the working class used to be at the center of certainly the Democrats' vision in the 40s and 50s. And then starting in the 60s, Democrats' attention shifted more onto poverty and then race, and then issues I've worked on my whole life, race and gender. And when attention shifted, I think they shifted away from understanding solid, hardworking, middle-class Americans' life and really the values that drive that life, the value of self-discipline that it takes to go to a not very glorious job every day for 40 years in a row. So I think that they really began to lose an understanding of what life looked like for these people.
And so do you think this is what, I know you've been very critical of some of the comments that have been made by Democratic leaders, for example, during the election campaign, the deplorables comment. Is that the kind of thing you're talking about in terms of just not understanding this experience?
I think that that's a good example. And I think another example, and I'm a Democrat, full disclosure, but I think the metaphor of the glass ceiling, what is the glass ceiling about? It's about that high-status women should be able to get the same jobs as their high-status husbands. The middle class actually doesn't care. They don't care about that. What they want is the kinds of jobs that their parents had, not necessarily glorious jobs, not necessarily even required college degrees, but they want the kinds of jobs that lead to a solid middle-class life. You know, a generation ago, about 90% of American kids were doing better than their kids, their parents, by age 30. Now that's fallen to about 50%. People see the American dream slipping from their fingers, and understandably, they're just not happy about it.
Well, thanks so much for setting that out.
Well, if you watch the news these days, you know that there is no bigger story in the history of mankind than Russia and its dastardly role, its pivotal role in the 2016 presidential election.
It's the president himself who may have made this look sinister. Reporters, foreign policy analysts, and our allies can safely assume the worst.
This is unprecedented, and the closest we have is the Nixon period of Watergate, and well, that didn't turn out too well.
Yet he has been so nice to the Russians. Do you think our president is helping Russia be great again?
Blah, 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 blah. As the Soviets learned over 70 years, you can feed people a nonstop diet of propaganda, but you can't make them eat it, much less digest it. And America's television viewers don't seem to be. How do we know? From a new Bloomberg poll. It shows that the #1 issue that Americans actually care about, not Russia, it's health care, 35%. After that, it's jobs, and then terrorism, immigration, and then climate. Only 6% of Americans think Russia is the most important issue in the country. So why the obsession on television? Interesting question. Two smart people here to answer it. John Daniel Davidson, a senior correspondent for The Federalist. Joe Concha writes about media for The Hill, and they both join us tonight. First to you, Joe, since you watch TV for a living, are we overstating the proportions here? Every time I flip on the tube or see a bank of them, it's all Russia. Is that my imagination?
It's not your imagination, and you know I love numbers, Tucker, so let me give you a Harvard-Harris poll. They do polls exclusively for The Hill. They gave this to us a couple of weeks ago. Fascinating stuff. 73%. Now remember, we're in a polarized country. Getting to 73%, 3 out of 4 people, is nearly impossible. Are concerned the Russia probes have caused Congress to lose focus on issues important to them. 56% say the media should move on to Russia and on to other issues. But the problem is we have lazy producers and hosts who love the narrative too much. They're too enamored to do something on, say, tort reform, right? That's health care, right? To do a deep dive into tort reform and talk about, my wife's a doctor, so I can somewhat talk intelligently to this, defensive procedures, unnecessary ones, keeping patients overnight, like Charles Krauthammer told you a couple nights ago on your program, and all the hundreds of billions that costs and how that affects health care and how that should be in legislation. That's too complicated, because that would actually make producers, hosts, journalists do real work on television instead of just relying on a tape that was provided of an intercept of Jeff Sessions and saying, okay, here's our big bombshell for the night. It's all
I do think that's part of it. You can never understate the role of laziness in news coverage. But, John, since you think about big questions for a living rather than watch television, answer this. So the conventional conservative understanding is the media are liberal. They're trying to take down the president because he's a Republican. But actually, if they focused on health care, that would not be helpful for the president. The Republicans haven't done anything great on health care. In fact, they could use that to criticize Trump, and yet they're still sticking to Russia, which their viewers don't actually want. Why are they doing that? Is it because they believe the conspiracy themselves?
Well, part of this goes back to 2016 and the presidential election. The media has this idea of itself in this heroic role where they're going to be the ones to hold the evil administration accountable. Just like during the campaign, during the election, they were sort of on a crusade to discredit Trump and make him seem like a buffoon and make the Republicans seem like a buffoonish party for nominating him and make voters seem like buffoons for supporting him. So this is part of a grand narrative I think the media has about itself and its role in American life.
Yes.
And just like in the election, they don't really understand that they're out of step with the American people, and the American people aren't buying into this narrative about the heroic media.
They don't even know that they don't understand. You're right. There's this pomposity, this hubris that's almost unbearable. But we watch it anyway, Joe. We do watch other channels, even as this show is going on. And just about 4 minutes ago, Maxine Waters of Los Angeles, one of the richest people in L.A., also a congresswoman from there, said that she was going to attempt to begin impeachment proceedings against the president. Here's also what she said. Watch this.
Ask you on your way out. Tucker Carlson did a send-up to you last night, claiming in a conversation with Larry Elder that you are running for president in 2020. Is there any truth to that?
No, just because I'm going to New Hampshire to be at a Democratic Party event for one of my colleagues. They made the story up. They're trying every way they can to discredit me or to make people uncomfortable with me, all of that. So you're going to be hearing a lot more from these people who are all, aligned around trying to discredit Maxine Waters because she has stayed on Trump's case so much. And so you're going to hear a lot more from them. Well, don't believe anything they're saying.
And I'm glad we're going to also hear a
I had to play that. I just couldn't control myself. Because, of course, Maxine Waters is self-discrediting. But why does Maxine Waters get to go on cable channels and no one ever mentions her ethical problems, the fact she lives in a $4.5 million house after working for the government for 40 years, et cetera? I mean, they're super hyper skeptical of everything Trump says, and they're not skeptical at all of anything Maxine Waters says. Why is that?
Well, it's the Dan Rather thing, right, Tucker? I mean, you played Dan Rather in a clip before, and he is on television often, and he is always talking about the moral virtues of journalism, and people forget that he was fired from CBS in 2004 because he presented fake documents in a 60-minute story. It's like having Bernie Madoff on to get him out of prison and have him give financial advice. Forget about that whole pyramid scheme thing. Bernie, tell us what you think about what we should do with our money. That's like the Dan Rather effect. Like, forget everything that happened. We want to hear your opinion because
it's like having Ed Gein on to do a vegetarian segment. So, John, at what point does the press move off Russia, do you think?
Well, they're going to stay on Russia just like the Democrats are going to stay on Russia because they think that that's their meal ticket. The Democrats think that staying on Russia is their ticket to win the House, and they're going to run on impeachment. They're going to run on Russia. The media is going to stay on Russia as long as it keeps buying into this narrative about itself. I think the only thing that will get these people's attention is if the American people start tuning them out, which is starting to happen. You see with CNN's ratings, taking a dive. Their whole programming approach right now is built around hammering away at Russia. I think the only thing that will get their attention is if people tune them out, and hopefully they start doing so.
Yeah, I trust markets. John, Joe, thanks a lot for that. Appreciate it.
Have a good weekend.
The counselor to the president, President Trump, Kellyanne Conway, joining us on the couch this morning. Nice to see you.
My pleasure.
Now, on Friday, right before this announcement came out, we were talking to you about it. You were praising Anthony Scaramucci, who, if he were part of that team, would be a huge asset. I think we saw on Friday what an asset he's going to become. You also said that Sean Spicer, you thought, would remain in the White House and would continue to work there, and then he resigned.
Well, that's Sean's choice, and of course the president made very clear he wanted Sean to stay. But Sean decided, and has told Fox News' Sean Hannity, that he felt it was best to give them a fresh start, a clean slate. And I think he'll do very well for himself. He'll go make a lot of money. He's a patriot. He has a great communications mind, Spicer. He's able to look at a complex issue and figure out how to deploy people for regional media, national media, social media. For a president who is incredibly media savvy and a communications expert in his own right. Media and communications is important to every president, but to this president, it's really essential because he himself has such a great eye for that, and he knows the only way to connect directly with the American people and cut through all the noise is to help all of us out there helping to break the news and connect them with the information they need to have. I mean, there's such I know we know there's biased coverage, but there's such incomplete coverage of all the things he's done. The average American needs to know what's in place for veterans now, all these great improvements for them, the Accountability Act, the whistleblower protection, the 24/7 White House hotline, the fact that for a first time in decades, a veteran is seen as one single patient at the DOD and the VA, so it cuts out the bottleneck, the red tape, and allows that veteran to get the care he or she deserves.
How do you do that with a press room full of liberal? I mean, frankly, they're all liberals, and they're all accosting this president. How do you get them to focus on things they refuse to want to focus on?
All types of motivators, shame, guilt, information, elixir, and there are many different ways to do that. You can go at them or you can go around them. But I think what they've been doing is these reporters are no longer chasing a story so much as chasing the president, and that's starting to backfire because I'm a person at the White House who's deployed probably about once a week, every 10 days or so, out into America, and I am constantly meeting people, and these are not just Republicans or conservatives, meeting people saying, I want him to succeed. I love this country. This is our time. He's doing great things. He's keeping his promise. But he's there to drain the swamp, and the swamp doesn't always like it. And the swamp isn't just Congress, isn't just lobbyists. It's everybody who's had a hand in the inertia and the deadlock that is Washington.
Do you think the media will change? I mean, you saw that clip when we brought you in with Anthony Scaramucci, and just sort of the different way that he was able to handle some of the tough questions that came at him. He's very transparent. He comes across very calm. He tells them exactly what's going on, so there's nothing to hide. And he's hoping that maybe the media can respond in a different way. As you said, a new chapter for the communications team. Do you think the media will change at all?
They are certainly curious about the new changes, and I think that the greatest irony is they've been covering all these palace intrigue stories literally since the day we got there. Yeah. Whose head is going to roll? Who's in the doghouse? Who's being fired? Who's being replaced? And nobody has been. In other words, we had 3 CNN reporters fired, but nobody from the inner circle. The president is additive when it comes to that. He wants more people around him. What I think will change is there'll be maybe a fresh start and a wider berth to at least see. But Anthony Scaramucci is something else, as is Sarah Huckabee Sanders, as is, frankly, people around the president who I think thrive and succeed the best. Tough but humble. His story, his American dream story. He's a self-made person. Yes, he's a street fighter who can also handle a C-suite meeting, but he's also very humble and self-made. He's a Trump guy.
We kept hearing this on Friday, that this is Trump's guy, right? And there are other members who know the Trump administration well are saying now Trump gets his guy in that role. And it's interesting to see how many more people could be placed in those roles. You think the Trump administration, they come in January, they get to put all of their own people in there, right? But he's being pulled by the swamp in different directions from Republicans who've established
Corey Lewandowski and David Bossie going to the Hill. I mean, are we seeing a changing of the guard at all?
So is he going to get more of his people in there?
Well, he is surrounded by people inside and outside who continue to give him great advice. And I think the people who do best in the Trump orbit, whether they are officially in the White House or on the outside helping us in different ways, are the people who recognize he is the greatest communicator. He is his best messenger. We're there to support him. He leads. I mean, this man beat every odd, vanquished 16 opponents, and then Hillary Clinton. And we should not lose sight of how that happened. That happened because he trusts his own instincts. He's unflappable. And when people hit him, he hits back twice as hard. And he's, as he always says, he's a counterpuncher. I'm much the same way. I don't draw first blood, but you draw blood on us, you're not going to win that debate. And he continues to be that way as president. But the focus he has on these issues at hand, his love for the military and the working man, and keeping these manufacturing jobs in this country. Look at him yesterday at the USS Gerald Ford, where he's just so proud to launch this new vessel, and so proud of the thousands of patriots who will serve there, and they're there for him as well. It's indicative, it's symptomatic of how he became the president and how he continues to flourish outside of the noise.
I'd love your advice for Sarah Huckabee Sanders, because you're out there. You said you're tough. You've been through a lot, though. I mean, you have been criticized many times by the mainstream media. Now Sarah Huckabee Sanders is stepping in as this new press secretary. It's an incredibly tough job to have. You are that middle person between President Trump and the media. I mean, you go on social media and you read some of these attacks on her, many of them personal, cruel, awful attacks about her looks, about her as a person. What advice do you have for the mainstream media handling her and advice for her on how she moves forward.
Well, I love Sarah and respect her enormously, and I can't be happier that she's agreed to take on this job. I'm pretty sure she's the first mother to ever be our nation's press secretary, and I got a little goosebump just because I know what that entails. She's got these 3 young children. It gives her a wonderful perspective, but it also gives you such a balance. You realize what's really important in this world. She can go home at night and in the morning and see there's a husband and 3 children who love her no matter what, and it's very grounding. She doesn't have to worry about what the jackals and hyenas say. Also, let's have a conversation, Abby, here and continuing, about the irony of, quote, modern feminism.
Right.
Yeah. They look right past sexist comments said about conservative women, definitely pro-life women like Sarah and me. The minute they find out we're pro-life, we're not...
They say you just hate women.
Well, what they are, but look, I pray for them. They'll be in my prayers today and every day, because I can't imagine what can make somebody so miserable that you have to attack another woman's looks or clothing or way. You want to disagree on policy? Let's have at it. That's what this country is founded on. But we really should have a larger, cleansing conversation, frankly, about an honest conversation about how people are treated. But Sarah will do very well because she knows she's there to serve the country, and she tries very hard. She's an incredibly hard worker who was raised in politics. She's tough, she's smart, but she's also humble, and she's also very accessible. And I think all of that will serve her well, and I couldn't be more proud.
Well, speaking of double standards, the president was tweeting yesterday morning and tweeted about the fact that, you know, all this focus on the investigation and special counsels, why aren't we looking at Hillary Clinton or Comey's crimes, the 33,000 emails and things like that? Is there going to be a renewed focus on that, maybe looking at what Hillary did, but also going after the special counsel and this witch hunt, as the president calls it, against him?
The president has always said this is Russia's nonsense. It's a witch hunt. It's a hoax. It's a conclusion in search of evidence, frankly. I mean, honestly, what are we doing here? What is this about? The taxpayer money, the diversion of resources and time. He's talking about America, they're talking about Russia. And the president is making clear he has no business dealings in Russia. I was the campaign manager. I knew the campaign very well. We were talking to people in Macomb County, Michigan, not Moscow. And this president, you know, I was on the other side. I had worked for a super PAC in support of Ted Cruz for a while. There was no way to vanquish Donald Trump. He was the smartest, most unflappable, and we weren't like, gee, should we call Russia to try to get rid of him? It's just such complete nonsense. See, it makes you laugh just to think about it with a straight face. And let me just say, the Miss Universe pageant happened to go to Russia 9 years ago. He sold his house to a Russian 10 years ago. What was everybody so prescient that they're like, I think this man will run for president? I mean, 10 minutes before he won the darn thing, people were saying he will never be the president. So 10 years earlier, someone in Russia someone who is Russian was supposed to realize, I think he one day will be president. I'll have access. It's nonsense. It's a waste of taxpayer time and money. And may I say, you've got Adam Schiff and Mark Warner, the 2 Democrats in charge of these partly in charge of the investigations. They spend more time on TV than collecting the evidence anyway. So what is this truly about?
Big stories coming up in Washington this week. How the White House will deal with the massive communication shakeup. What's the new power map look like? Also word, Jared Kushner, Donald Trump Jr., Paul Manafort will talk to congressional investigators behind closed doors. Now, Garrett Tenney had some reporting earlier about the exact timing. Democrats, though, say all those people are key players in possible Russian interference. They call it collusion. Republicans have a different view. Let's bring in our fair and balanced political panel. Al Mater, partner at Brownstein, Hyatt, Farber, and Schreck, also a Democratic fundraiser. Patrick Griffin, CEO of Merrimack, Potomac, and Charles. Gentlemen, I think with all those names, we need a merger of at least a couple of them.
We should explore it.
Yeah, all right. Well, a new bipartisan group. Patrick, to you first. As I've traveled around the country, both reporting and for other stuff over the past couple of months, nobody seems to be talking about the Russia situation, at least that I've talked to in places like Michigan and Virginia. Fewer are talking about the palace intrigue at the White House, yet the White House can't seem to get off talking about those issues and on to talking about the issues that folks in the heartland care about: health care, taxes, regulation reform. Where is this huge gulf, and how does the White House fix it? Does Mr. Scaramucci fix it?
Well, I think, Leland, first of all, that's a very interesting thing, because people in this country don't really care about a lot of this palace intrigue. This is a story of Washington, largely driven by Washington, and in fairness, in some ways driven by this president. If the president could ignore some of this stuff, stop the tweeting, and allow his people to go forward with their message, doesn't matter who the messenger is. Anthony Scaramucci has proven, both on Friday and today on the Sunday shows, including on this network, he's a very capable guy. He is the antithesis of Sean Spicer. He's smart, he's slick, he clearly has the president's back, and the president trusts him. I think more than anything else, though, the White House needs to be a little more disciplined about the stuff that got Donald Trump elected president, and more importantly, as you point out, the stuff Americans really care about right now. We've gotten morassed in all of this morass by driving the media's agenda in Washington, and unfortunately, the White House has played a part in this. That needs to change.
Al, as Patrick points out, the Democrats have kind of gotten a free pass of talking about the issues because of all of what you might call the distractions the White House has been dealing with. Democrats worried now that Anthony Scaramucci comes in, he focuses, he adds a little bit of discipline, he says he's going to stop the leaks. Does that force Democrats now to have to deal with the issues like health care, like tax reform?
I mean, I don't think Democrats are really worried about Scaramucci. Just because the president has a smooth-talking hedge fund buddy doesn't mean that the message out of the White House is going to be better, or frankly, that the issues are going to change, which is to say they haven't delivered on their campaign promises. Democrats are ready to talk about health care any day now, but the Republicans keep insisting on repealing a bill and taking health care away from millions of Americans. If they want to work in a bipartisan fashion, Democrats are ready.
All right, back to Mr. Scaramucci. You guys seem to both agree that he's pretty smooth talking. There was some issues, though, if you look back in his tweets, including one where he called the president a political hack. He was asked about that specific tweet and his tweets that may be disagreeable with some of the things the president believes with earlier on Fox News Sunday. This is what he said.
The president was hitting the hedge fund industry that morning on Fox and Friends, okay? And so I'm a fighter. When he's hitting the hedge fund industry, and that's my lifeblood, I'm hitting back. Okay, he knows that. He respects it about me. We were laughing about that last night.
Patrick, it seems as though the one thing the president does like around him are people who are quote-unquote fighters in one way or another. That's how the president sees himself. Is that the way to get things done going forward, the things we talked about earlier the American people care about?
Well, I think the president's a fighter, and the president wants someone around him he thinks can defend him. But more importantly, I think what Mr. Scaramucci will bring to this thing is a strategic communications approach as opposed to a pure tactical one. Getting up in front of the press at the White House briefing room and sort of just having to defend constantly things that aren't always seen coming is not a good thing. I also think more than anything else, we've got to look at this in two parts. Sarah Huckabee Sanders will be doing the work from the podium. I think she's proven to be very deft and capable. This is not someone new to politics. She's grown up with this, and she's been pretty good. I think Anthony Scaramucci will drive some sort of a comms strategy. I've been at this a long time, and without a strategy, it doesn't matter how smooth the talking is, it's hard to get your points across. The right person will be there. I think the president will have confidence in that. And if so far Mr. Scaramucci's performances are any indication of his capability, I think we're in for a very interesting time between the Washington media and the Trump administration. More interesting and more disciplined than we've seen in the past.
Al, you get about 15 seconds. Is the fight between the Washington media and the Trump administration, or should it be between the Republicans and the Democrats?
Well, the country wants Republicans and Democrats to work together. The fight is the media and the president and his own party, because they can't even agree on how to repeal health care.
All right. Well, we will talk about a potential merger of Brownstein, Hyatt, Farber, Schreck, Merrimack, Potomac, and Charles during our next conversation, gentlemen. Thanks so much.
That will make America great again. That will make America great again.
Negotiations to come. All right, Liz?
All right, can't